Hey, this is Gordon for Inspiration TS. In this video, we're gonna work on the Fantasy Revolver in 3ds Max and Substance Painter. So please like and share this video, and I'll see you on the inside. Alright, this is the tutorial in which we're gonna create this Fantasy Revolver in 3ds Max and Substance Painter. So the first thing we're gonna do is to try to create the cylinder, and of course, according to the reference image we can see on the left viewport, we're going to create something that is going to look cylindrical, and of course we're going to crop or delete some parts of it and try to adapt it to match it with the details we can see on the reference image. And as you can see here, I'm kind of holding shift and moving these edges around to perform what we call edge extrusion, which is a very important process that we use often in 3ds Max, because I'm using now the method that is actually called edge extrusion to model this gun in 3ds Max. And right now I'm using the symmetry modifier in order to add the other half, and I try to actually lower the cost of time the time we're spending here, and it is actually a very effective method just to work on one half, and the symmetry modifier is going to take care of the other half later. And right now I'm trying to close the gaps and probably fix how the symmetry modifier is going to work right now, and later probably we're going to take a look and try to fix some of the areas here. For example, from the back, probably here in the bottom, we probably need to fix it a little bit here, and probably push some of the edges around. And I think this is the piece that kind of demands a little bit of creativity and perspective on your side, because it needs you to be present in the third dimension, since the blueprint probably is not gonna give you that much information or details about what is going on in some hidden areas. So you gotta be creative and think about it and try to actually imagine it and fix everything in the areas that you can see if you're relying on the reference image. Okay, from the back also, we can perform some adjustments here in order to close these areas using the bridge tool in the poly tool set. And it's not gonna look that fancy, but I think for now it is acceptable. Probably later we can change this if possible. So we're gonna borrow that piece right there and try to create another one in the back. So these two pieces actually look very similar, so there is no need actually to start all over and create something from scratch, because this is gonna be probably a waste of time. So in our case here, we're trying to create a piece that is gonna look similar to the first one, and with minor tweaks here and there, it's gonna look nice. It's gonna look interesting, and I think it's gonna be similar but different in a few aspects, and that's just fine, because variation is very important in order to make things look a little bit better. All right, now we're gonna create as you can see here, the cylinder that is gonna be, and it is actually called the cylinder. So it's gonna be very simple, nothing fancy to it, just a few interesting details here and there, and we'll be ready to go. So the thing I like about this model is its simplicity, and it's just straightforwardness in kind of creating it, and the results are going to be quite interesting. They're not going to be that complicated, but they're going to be nice. So this model I spent about about 7 hours in creating it. In actually recording time is 7 hours. Sometimes if you're doing research or trying to fix some problems or doing some things behind the scenes, probably is gonna take you up to 10 hours. So I think it is worth it. And for you guys, I think yeah, I think if you're learning and if you're getting some value here and if you're learning something, please smash that like button for me, because this really helps, and it helps other people as well, because for me it's not that much that big of a deal when it comes to the return I'm getting. It's just your support and the value you're getting, and what you're learning is for now, and for now, for the most part, is my reward, because these videos are not huge and they're not popular, but probably if you support me enough, I'm gonna create more of these, which make them more popular, I think. Okay, now we're creating the piece that I call, probably it is called the barrel support, because these pieces are which the barrel is going to go through. So we're going to create a cylinder that is going to be probably it's going to be 8 sides for now. And thing is, it's not going to be all cylindrical, because I think it's gonna be a little bit wide in certain areas and it's gonna be narrow, probably on um, actually the front is gonna be wide and the side is gonna be as it is. It's not gonna be changed that much. The thing is, we're gonna create it and you'll see what I mean in a few minutes. Okay, now we're gonna try to create the barrel, which is gonna be a piece that is actually very important, and it exists in all firearms, and it's gonna be in the center. So it's gonna go through the pieces, the two pieces we created previously. So it's gonna have some details to it, but it's not gonna be that big of a deal though. So it's something simple, something as usual, something that we used to create before, and it's gonna be a little bit interesting. Okay, now we're gonna go to the back, and as you can see here, the process looks similar to what we have in the front, but it's a little bit different. So instead of creating a barrel, we're gonna create a rod that is, I don't know what it does exactly, but I think it is important to a certain extent. So whatever we're gonna do here is gonna be very simple. So two cylinders of 8 sides. We're gonna try to position them in a nice position, and after that, we're going to actually probably mess with some of the details on this piece in the back. I think I'm gonna separate the wood from the metal, real quick, and probably we can adjust how this is gonna look. All right, nice. I'm gonna actually extrude the wooden part before we separate it, and this is very important because I don't like to actually detach elements that are thin and just one-sided because it's not gonna look nice. And if we apply some like these smoothie modifiers like turbo smooth, it's gonna look ugly if the smoothie modifier is gonna separate these surfaces, and it's not gonna look good. Okay, try to put it in a nice position right there, and maybe change the position of some of these vertices. Alright, now we're creating this rod using a simple cylinder and try to position it according to what we see in the reverse image, and probably change how it looks in the back, and change the materials also, which is going to be a very good idea. Also, there is a cylinder in the back, which is a nice addition, I think, since it doesn't look complicated, but it's going to add a few things right there which are going to be interesting. So now this torus also is going to represent that ring that is going to be hanging from the rod in the very back, which I think is kind of cool addition also, since we don't see a lot of these things in firearms, and it's going to be a lot better to look at it. So now we'll try to start creating the grip, which is extended till the front, and as you can see here, it is a very good and a very kind of curvy piece that is gonna go all through all these all the way down, and we're gonna use edge extrusion for the most part and try to rotate the edges and probably move some vertices here and there. Just be smart about it, and just don't add a lot of actually crazy amounts of details before you start kind of needing them. So when you need more details, you add more vertices and edges. You don't add them before you need them, because it's gonna make it harder for you to modify and adjust whatever you've done previously. Just try to modify the position of these pieces and try to put them in place according to what you see in the reference image, and later we're gonna try to modify anything if necessary. So here we're trying to actually cut the part that belongs to the grip plate, because we're gonna have to remove it or separate it very soon. So we're gonna do this in preparation for that part. All right, the grip plate, as you can see here, is a piece that is unique. So we have to adjust some of the vertices in order to actually to make it look as it's supposed to look. So we're gonna adjust some vertices here and there, and as you can see, we've detached it, and probably it's a good idea to actually move the outer part a little bit, kind of make it a little bit smaller to make a cool transition and to make it a little bit more smooth. And we don't want it to look like a box or something. We want it to look smooth on the outer side. All right, when it comes to the trigger guard, we're gonna start simple with a cylinder because we need that circular shape that is gonna be the starting point, and we're gonna try to use edge extrusion in order to expand. And once we actually try to cover, once we start covering the essential parts around it, we're gonna be just fine, and we can continue easily from that. So I think this is gonna be the essential part that we're gonna struggle with a little bit, even though it's not gonna be that hard. And then from that, we're gonna move out to the other parts. Okay, we're gonna try to follow the reference image here, and as you can see here, this shape is circular. We could have used a tube or something in order to use that circular section right there, but I think doing it manually also is not gonna be that difficult, so we can do it actually. And to be honest, we're gonna try to create all the trigger guard at once along with the trigger, and later we're gonna separate these pieces if necessary, because I find it easier to create a kind of a platform or foundation on which from which all the pieces are gonna be actually emerging, and it's gonna be easier for us, and it's gonna save us some time. And the most important thing is they are gonna be on the same level. So these pieces are gonna be on the same level, and when it comes to creating symmetry and stuff, it's not gonna be difficult for us since on the middle they kind of have the same level, and yeah, I think this is what I want to say. All right, now we'll try to separate the part that is going to be belonging to, or it's going to be attached to the grip from the part that is going to be the trigger guard, which is extremely important, and is going to determine how this weapon is going to actually look. And of course, the shell modifier when we add it is gonna give our weapon a little bit more thickness and is gonna make it a lot more nicer. And it's actually a reward for the work we've done in the on the left or the front view, depending on which viewport you're using. All right, so this area I think it has to be a little bit narrower because according to what I see, it has to be that way since the area here is gonna be made a little bit more thicker on that part, and I think it makes a lot more sense actually. All right, this part here is gonna be a little bit interesting to create. I would say not difficult, but a little bit challenging since what we are trying to do here is gonna be interesting. So as you can see here on that part, this part here is needed to be closed on the side. So we're gonna have to add some extra edges, and we're gonna perform the edge extrusion method in order to do this. So this is gonna be a little bit interesting, and you gotta be a little bit patient here. So patience is quite necessary because we're gonna apply a nice trick. So we're gonna cut this part and cut it in half, then use the symmetry modifier to uh, to to actually close it. But the issue here is we must do more work in order to attach all the pieces together and bring it back, and then actually weld all the vertices and add the extra edges that are gonna make it work. And after that, we're gonna perform the symmetry modifier once more in order to bring everything together. All right, now we'll select the area in the middle here because we need it to be extruded. All right, it actually needs to be extruded negatively because some of these parts need to pop out a little bit. All right, this small piece also is gonna be here, and I don't know what exactly this is called, but I think it's gonna be important, so we're gonna have to create it anyways. All right, so this is gonna be the front sight, and it's gonna be a simple piece that we're gonna create from using a plane, and yeah, it's gonna be not gonna be hard. It's just gonna be a simple piece. All right, so now there is the rear sight here. We're gonna create it using the same principle, but it's gonna be more actually much more different in terms of creation because this one is gonna be a little bit complicated compared to the first one. So for the most part, we're gonna create it in the perspective view since it has a third dimensional aspect to it. So uh, it's not gonna be hard or anything, but it just is gonna be different. Alright, once we are done with it, it is time now to actually add little pieces that is going to be in the back. And I think this is a nice addition because I like these pieces that are kind of small, but they kind of have a strong impact on how everything looks, which is a very nice thing to add right there. So we're gonna add one in the back, one in the front. Okay, also we're gonna add a few small pieces here on the rear side, which are not gonna be that noticeable anyways. So probably they're gonna be very small, like this. Put them right there. All right, nice. And we're gonna also create few rods here. So these are gonna be located in the grip, on the bottom of the grip, and one probably over here, which is not gonna be piercing through this metal piece. Probably also there's gonna be one in the trigger guard. Nice one also here. So for the most part, this is gonna be floating geometry, or I don't know, maybe we're not gonna make them floating geometry, but I think when the weapon is not complicated and these pieces are not repetitive, are not all over the place, I think we can keep them from being a floating geometry, because I think for floating geometry is reserved for the pieces that we cannot integrate with the high poly model, and we have to actually create them as separate them from the body of the high poly, and we're gonna bake them to Substance Painter. But if this is not gonna be the case, then it's good to actually keep the small pieces part of the high poly rather than making them a floating geometry. So this actually is gonna be the only little floating geometry in the whole thing, because it's hard to integrate to the high poly, and it's better to do it that way. Even though we can do it in Substance Painter easily, and we have some alphas that are gonna allow us to do these stuff, but I think doing it in 3ds Max is also gonna be a good thing. All right, we're gonna have to copy these pieces all over the place. All right, when it comes to the cylinder, we have to actually add some rods here and some floating geometry to create that illusion, that illusion that kind of there are holes and stuff, and creating actually adding these holes right there in that cylinder is gonna be time consuming, and it's not gonna be that necessary actually, because this part here is not gonna be that noticeable, to be honest. So now it's the time to for the processor creating support edges. So this process is highly repetitive. There are a few rules we need to to follow. So we need to first of all rely on two methods. Which one? The first one is gonna be using the tool that is called Swift Loop, that we're gonna use heavily, and also we're gonna use the connect and actually create rings and connections on the edges. So as I said before, this process is gonna be highly simple and highly repetitive. So probably I'm not gonna talk much in this part since it's gonna be very obvious and it speaks for itself, to be honest. So what you see is what you're gonna be doing. There's nothing fancy to it, there's nothing complicated, and there's nothing actually that is worth explaining here. So yeah, just follow along and you'll be just fine. And also, I'm using some materials here and there just to make sure that it's gonna be easier for me to tell which pieces I'm done with and which I am not done with. So I think this is an effective visual filter to actually make things easier and kind of help you move forward faster. And sometimes you're gonna have to delete the some of the pieces in the back because they're not gonna be necessary and they're not gonna be seen anyways. And also, before you start adding support edges to this piece, I forgot to tell you that I added two layers. I created two layers, which one for the high poly revolver and the other for the low poly revolver. And this is gonna save us some time actually when we start working on the next step, which is gonna be creating the low poly version of this gun. And yeah, it's gonna be a time saver. All right, so when it comes to creating a low poly version of this gun, we're gonna have to do a few things first. So the first thing I recommend is to remove all the floating geometry because we don't really need them since they're gonna be used actually for the high poly version only. So we're gonna have to remove all these floating geometry from our scene and from the low poly version. As I said before, we're not gonna need them anymore. We're not gonna need them. So this is the first thing, and of course, the other thing is the areas where we have kind of some cavity or some kind of um, alleys or valleys or whatever, and these areas kind of curved in or just carved in a little bit. We're gonna have to remove these areas because they are gonna be used or baked from the high poly on top of the low poly. Also, we're gonna have to remove all the vertices and the edges from the low poly. They're not gonna affect the overall silhouette of these pieces. So this is gonna be a common theme of what we are gonna do here. So this is gonna be highly repetitive, and of course, we're gonna try to target well all the pieces that are gonna be, or all the vertices that are not gonna add a lot to our pieces, and they're not gonna affect how these pieces are gonna look overall. Especially these lines in the center, we're gonna have to remove them since their major role was to actually allow the symmetry to happen. And after we collapse the symmetry modifier, there's no need for it, and it's gonna be absolutely not necessary. All right, so sometimes you gotta be careful because, especially when it comes to cylindrical shapes and stuff, it's not a good idea to remove them because they are absolutely necessary in order to keep everything and the silhouette in place. So as I said before, some of the carved areas we're gonna have to get rid of them because the high poly is gonna be covering these details using in the process of baking. And as you can see here, when we have a circular selection, we're gonna have to bring all the vertices into one point that is gonna be in the center. So this is gonna save us some few poly counts. It's gonna reduce the poly count a little bit and gonna save us some vertices and some edges. And overall, it's gonna be helpful to reduce the load on the game engine. So also when it comes to some of these cylindrical pieces, there aren't a lot of things we can do, but overall we can just try to reduce to bring it down to as low as possible. But overall there isn't much we can do because when it comes to cylindrical stuff and spherical stuff, it's kind of the angles in these pieces is changing all the time. So whenever we try to remove something, it's obviously going to affect the silhouette and it's going to make it look different or kind of flawed as somehow. Um, Straight and flat surfaces are gonna be our main target to reduce the poly count, and for the most part, some I would say that a lot of pieces don't actually need to be modified at any shape or form because they're basically already kind of at a very low poly count, so we don't have to do anything for them because it's absolutely not necessary. And I would say the standards for games these days for low poly or for the poly count these days is different from what it was like 5 or 10 years ago because game engines are a lot better, and actually computers are also a lot better than consoles and stuff. They can handle a little bit more of kind of geometry, and it's not gonna be a big of an issue like it was just a few years ago, as I said. So actually, this is the main purpose why we are doing this process in the first place, because we want to reduce the load on the game engines, since there is a limited uh, kind of limited amount of memory that we are allowed to use on kind of on the consoles like the Xbox or the PlayStation stuff. So anything we remove without affecting how the model is going to look is going to be a plus. It's going to be good. All right, so this piece here is going to be the heaviest when it comes to removing the vertices and the edges that are not necessary and converting this piece to low poly piece. So for the most part, we're trying to bring all of these pieces to a certain point in order to save ourselves some polygons. So we're gonna have to do this process twice, or we can just actually split this piece into two halves and just bring it back using the symmetry modifier later, which is gonna be a good thing. But be careful, just not make sure that you're just going to match it perfectly with the high poly version, because it's gonna be baked. Because the high poly is gonna be baked on top of the low poly, and you don't want to actually misplace it, and because the baking later in Substance Painter is gonna be a problem if you don't bring it back. And sometimes I don't want to risk, just do it twice if necessary, because especially if the process is not gonna be long, it's not worth the problems that are gonna be happening down the road. And I personally like the process of converting high poly models to low poly, because it's I think it's interesting, and it's never the same. It's always different, and sometimes it's a little bit challenging in order you try to think of ways of reducing the poly count without hurting your model. All right, and of course, I'm going to use the same method in order to identify the pieces that I'm done with using a different material, which is going to be very effective actually to see what's going on. And yeah, and that actually helps a lot. And right now, when it comes to the grip plate, I think the same principle holds true for this piece, because it has been extracted from the grip itself, so it should have the same placement of the vertices and polygons and stuff. So it shouldn't be that big of a deal. And when it comes to these small pieces, I think we don't have to spend a lot of time with them, because they're already kind of low poly and stuff, so it's already there. So when it comes to the next stage, which is going to be smoothing groups, we're going to make sure we're gonna make sure that the smoothing groups are correct in all the pieces that are low poly, because this process is extremely important since since the low poly has no other way to look smooth and soft in the areas that don't have to be hard edge. And as you noticed in the high poly, we used the turbo smooth modifier, which is of course, which is the modifier that is gonna allow the high poly to look smoothie and glossy and stuff. But in the low poly, we have no other way other than using smoothing groups. So we're gonna make sure they are correct, and the areas that should look sharp or hard edge, they will be, and the areas that look round and cylindrical and soft, they actually we're gonna make sure also they play the part. If you understand what I'm saying here. And this process is not going to be that long because it's simple, it's easy, just kind of, it is just a process that is necessary in order for us to jump to the next stage, which is going to be, it's not actually necessary for UV unwrapping, but it is a good thing in just in preparation, because sometimes we're going to need it. Sometimes we're going to use UV unwrapping using smoothing groups, which is good sometimes. It helps. For the most part, smoothing groups is just you're gonna need to auto actually clean all the smoothing groups and just auto smooth everything. For the most part, it's gonna work just fine, but sometimes there are some manual modifications or adjustments we need to do in order to make things look right. Because 3ds Max is a software and it doesn't know what we want. It just assumes things based on angles and mathematics. If it works for us, good. If it doesn't, we're gonna have to fix it. All right, so part 5, UV unwrapping. This is the one of the longest processes and the most repetitive. Probably, if you are used to it, probably you're gonna find it boring. So if you're new to this journey of UV unwrapping, it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be interesting. If you are kind of, if you've done it thousands of times, probably it's not gonna be that great, and probably I don't know. It depends on your on your situation. So we're gonna start unwrapping the most obvious pieces, or we have, or we can just start from a certain part and we're gonna make our way down or something. But for the most part, we're gonna try to unwrap all the pieces using the most the easiest techniques and the most straightforward ways and methods to achieve this, because at the end of the day, we're trying here to be effective and efficient and to do something that is correct. Sometimes we're gonna have to cut the seams manually because If we try to do it automatically, like using the the box mapping or something like that, or flatten mapping, the result is not going to be pleasant, and probably we're going to have to spend a little bit more time trying to fix the mess that these tools is going to leave are going to leave. So sometimes, as I said, it's a good idea just to do things manually in order to ensure that whatever we are doing here is going to be correct in the first place, even though we're going to spend a little bit of time doing it. But we're going to make this way is going to ensure that everything is working properly. So when it comes to the rear sight, also we're going to have to actually approach it probably manually for or just we're gonna use smoothing groups. So this is what I said before. So smoothing groups are gonna be helpful sometimes to tell 3ds Max how this should unfold based on smoothing groups, which is very important actually. If you rely on it, it's gonna save you some time and some sanity, which is a plus. And here we're trying to organize these pieces close together because we want everything belongs to this piece to be close, because this is very important later. And we'll apply the checker texture once we're done. All right, this screw is gonna be all over the place, so this is a good thing because the other screws are also instances, so we don't have to do the work all over again. We just need to apply the checker texture because it's already there. We don't have to do any additional work. Okay, when it comes to the front sight, it's gonna be extremely simple since, as you can see here, it's not complicated in any shape or form. Just free and actually just simple and nice edges. All right, this piece was simple, so we're gonna have to apply this texture to it. And when it comes to the barrel here, we're gonna approach it manually, and we're gonna try to cut it open in certain areas. We're gonna cut it open in certain areas. Then we're gonna use the tools that are actually exist in the UVW unwrap UVW modifier in order to make it flat. When it comes to these pieces, actually, it is extremely simple. So I don't think that a lot of explanation here is going to be necessary because it basically speaks for itself. All right, so when it comes to this torus here, it's gonna be a little different because there is a nice approach we can use, which is just to split it into halves, and we're gonna make it flat. I think this is quick, and it is a quick and easy method to use. Also, in wrapping the plate or the grip is gonna be super easy. We just need to make it flat and cut it open in certain corners, and we're gonna be ready for it. Okay, as you can see here, when it comes to the grip itself, it's a pretty big piece. So I think automation here is not gonna do us any good, since 3ds Max does not know exactly what we're trying to do here. Manually here, cutting these seams, I think it's gonna be a little bit quicker and a lot more precise. Since we know exactly what we are going for, I think it's gonna be easier for us. All right, this piece here is a little bit messy, so we're gonna have to be a little bit patient and focused, because it's easy to make mistakes here, and it's easy to get confused and kind of rush and not do a really good job. All right, when it comes to unwrapping the trigger guard, I think it's going to be a little bit tricky, because especially in the area down here, it's gonna be a little bit interesting, because we don't know exactly how this is gonna unfold. So we're gonna try it for ourselves and see. I think it's gonna be the most complicated, but we'll see. I think now we're done with the process of unwrapping, and it's time to pack all the UVs together. So this process here, which is actually additional part of UV unwrapping, it is extremely important to get the results we desire after unwrapping everything. So this is the aim behind unwrapping everything. If we don't do this, then we might as well not do it in the first place. So we're trying to first, we'll try to separate all the pieces or all the islands that kind of belong to, they're kind of the pieces that are going to be similar. And the reason why behind this is we want when we texture them, we don't want the same texture to be seen on the same piece in the same way, because it's gonna look fake and it's not gonna look original. And this is the last thing we wanna get, or we wanna see. All right, there are just few pieces we need to put in place, and we'll be ready for the next stage, or the next part. All right, it seems like it is over, except this part here that we forgot. Somehow we forgot to work on. All right, now we're gonna have to actually name all the parts. So right now, what we're trying to do is we'll try to prepare for baking by naming all the parts on the low poly and on the high poly. So we're gonna open, as you can see here, the layer explorer and bring back the high poly and the low poly. Both of them are gonna be and hidden on the scene, and using the naming tool, we're gonna name all the pieces, small, big, whatever. They are gonna be all named in a manner that is gonna allow them to be baked nicely. So Substance Painter is actually the man that the pieces that are gonna be baked on top of each other. They demand it demand that it demands that they're gonna have the same names, exactly the same names. So using a tool like this is gonna be very important. We can work without it, but I think with it is gonna be much organized and much easier. And God, it's sometimes it's difficult to find the proper and kind of correct names for all the pieces, because sometimes simply this is a fantasy weapon. This does not, there isn't an actual weapon that looks exactly like this. So some of these pieces are gonna be kind of imaginary, and we need to actually find names for them. Just find a name that is not gonna look too ridiculous. All right now, after we name everything, we're gonna check if there are some few pieces that we forgot to give proper names to. If there are these pieces, we're gonna check them individually and try to add the right names to them, and we should be ready to jump to the next part. All right, so now I'm actually now this part is we're going to bake the high poly on top of the low poly. So this is going to be very important because all the work we've done previously is actually or basically going to or boils down to this point. So yeah, it's very important that the hard work we've done on the high poly is going to show on our on our low poly, which is gonna be interesting to do. There are these highly technical parameters that we're gonna play with. It's not gonna be hard though. So when it comes to this part, which is gonna be texturing, we're gonna start adding some textures. So for the most part, texturing is fun, easy, and it just demands one thing, that is that you need to have a solid reference image that you're going to use, and you're going to have kind of um, an eye that observes details in a nice way. And you need to know how light works and how materials work, and how kind of everything blends together, and the effects necessary to make things look interesting and kind of alive. So there are a lot of tools we can use in Substance Painter to do the job. So actually, Substance Painter is a 3D painting software, and it allows for a variety of options and tools, and it's actually great, to be honest. So it is gonna allow us to do some amazing cool stuff all the time. All right, now as you can see, I'm changing how the wood material is gonna look like. So the details on the wood and all the other things. And first of all, I'm gonna create folders in which all the materials are gonna fall. All these certain materials are gonna fall into certain folders, and these folders are gonna actually come with masks, and this is gonna allow me to actually contain or limit where these materials are gonna where they're gonna affect the low poly pieces. So it's gonna be very important, and it's gonna save us some time. So here I'm trying to create a mask for certain materials, like for this gold or bronze material. Probably I'm gonna make it look like it is bronze later, depending on what we need. And sometimes you're gonna do some manual hand painting, which is sometimes necessary, and it's fun. Actually, I like it because it's interesting. It's not boring at all. When you know the right rules, when you know the right tools to use, it's gonna be easy to work with, and it's gonna be fun. Okay, we'll try to do the same thing here when it comes to these areas, and we're gonna delete some of the effects that are gonna be spilling over to on certain pieces. And this is not necessary. What I like about Substance Painter is it's gonna allow you to paint in the third dimension, which is great. Now we're gonna add a metal or actually gunmetal material, and this is for the most part is gonna be the material that is gonna be covering everything. So we have to make it look right. Actually, there is. I wasn't, to be honest, I wasn't that careful when I was packing the UV. So, as you can see here, there is a little bit of overlap right there, which is not which is not something I'm happy about. So, I think if you are not too far in the process, you can go back and adjust the UVs, which is gonna be a good thing to do because you want in the end of the day to create something nice and clean. And for the sake of this, for this tutorial, I didn't want to spend more time trying to fix it because it's not gonna add to the value of the tutorial. Because I think you're not necessarily going to have to make the same mistakes as me because you're not kind of I think you know what you're doing and you're not gonna make the same mistakes, so just be careful when packing the UVs. Don't overlap any surfaces or any UV islands and you're gonna be good. So probably here I'm gonna change the color of the gamma material because I want it to look a little bit lighter because this color here is a lot darker than I need. And yep, we need to actually add certain areas. We're gonna add this material to it. Actually made two areas overlap, which is annoying really. I wasn't paying a lot of attention, but probably I was tired. So yeah, for now this is the base. These are the basic materials we're gonna need, and for now I'm gonna add a material that we're gonna use in order to kind of create the wear and tear, which is a very important thing, especially in metallic parts. Also, I want to make the color of the wood look a little bit darker and more realistic, and I wanted to match a little bit more kind of the rest of the materials on this gun. Okay, nice. We're applying the same thing, the weir effect on the trigger guard and the trigger area. And to do this, we're gonna actually use a material, a bright material, metal material, and we're gonna use a mask. Then we're gonna use generator, the edge wear generator. We're gonna apply it to the material inside whatever folder we are working with, and it should work just fine because we've done this previously, and it should be working properly. And guys, if you haven't checked my Patreon, please kind of it is a good place to actually support each other. And if you help me kind of generate how do I say this, if you help me to actually kind of support myself to continue spending more time on these tutorials, because like this one I kind of spend 10 hours or something working on this one for you guys. I hope you appreciate the effort, and I'm gonna give you the low poly version of it, which is gonna help you to actually see how I named all the pieces. How you're gonna take a look at the UVs and how I unwrapped everything. You're gonna take a look at the smoothing groups and a lot of other things that are included with on the low poly version of this gun. And I'm thinking about in the future about actually creating specific and special videos for my Patreons, which is worth it, which is actually a lot more important than I probably think right now. Or we'll see what we can do about it. For now, I think this tutorial is almost done, and if you made it till the end and you didn't skip right away to the end, I just think you are just amazing and serious about learning. And if you found this tutorial interesting and useful, please smash that like button for me because this really helps. And what else? Share this tutorial if you think it is useful, because this really helps a lot. So sharing is caring, as they say. And if you care for this place and you want it to be more interesting and more developed, please help me make this become the reality. May help me make this kind of happen. And I wish you the best, and I hope you are learning a lot. And yeah, and I think I will have to see you in the next video. Take care.